Hello, you are live on 4th Street with Larry Bisig and my guest, Congressman John Yarmuth. John, thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you, Larry.
Terrific honor. We have known each other for many years, and this gives us a chance to find out what John's plans are in the future and what things have been going on in the past. So thank you, John. I appreciate it. A little bit of background. John is a Yale graduate. He's also an Atherton graduate. I don't know if there's that many Atherton graduates that went to Yale. How many?
That's a good question. I have no idea. Well, I know I was the only one out of my class when I graduated, but I'm sure there have been some since then.
Let's talk a little bit about how you got into politics. You were an aide to Marlowe Cook for a while. Tell me about that.
Well, after I graduated from high school, I actually was an intern for Marlowe Cook when he was county judge executive here. And then I interned for him again the next summer. And then in 1968, when he ran for U.S. Senate, I spent the summer working on his campaign and ironically traveled the state with some guy named Mitch McConnell.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. So you worked with Mitch McConnell traveling the state for Marlowe Cook. Now, there's a story that I have to share that I want to know if there's any truth to. You're at an airport. Of course, you all fly all the time as members of Congress. And Senator McConnell is there. And you waved at Senator McConnell, yet he did not acknowledge your presence, even though you all had a history. True or not true?
I can't remember that. I will say that for most of the time that I was in Congress, and a lot of times we found ourselves on the same plane going back and forth, he was always very civil to me. Now, I will say that when we on occasion would reach out to his office to possibly work on something together that was had a particular Kentucky interest, he was never willing to do that. But again, he was always very gracious. When I announced that I was retiring from Congress, he called me and couldn't have been nicer.
Beautiful.
So yeah, we got along fine. And the sad thing about it, I never considered myself a friend of Mitch McConnell's. We worked together that one summer. We ran together for office, which I don't even want to go into, in 1981 when I was still a Republican, and so we had quite a long relationship. But what I found myself, because I was the only Democrat in the federal delegation from Kentucky, I was always asked about something that Mitch had said. So I was always commenting, I wasn't, if I thought he was lying, I was going to say he was lying. So I was the one who was always out there criticizing him. And I did say to him when he made that nice phone call to me, I said, I really hated the fact that I was the one who always had to push back on you, but I was the only one they asked. And he said, don't worry about it, I'm a professional.
How did you decide to make the switch from Republican to Democrat?
I was in that category of Republicans that most people don't realize ever existed, that were known as the Rockefeller Republicans. And you could be a progressive, a liberal in the Republican Party going back to the 60s and 70s and feel very comfortable. When you think about some of on the national level, again, these names won't mean a lot to a lot of people, but people like Jacob Javits and Ed Brooke and Margaret Chase Smith and Mark Hatfield and Chuck Percy, these are all pretty progressive people, and they were Republicans. Well, that became very difficult after Ronald Reagan became president.
Yeah.
Because he moved the party very dramatically.
And you didn't like that.
I didn't like that.
And you didn't like it specifically because of the religious undertones of that move.
Well, first of all, it was Reagan's, always harping on the welfare queens and deriding people who needed federal help. And then bringing in people like Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell and people where the religious conservative movement had a real big seat at the table in the Reagan administration. So I was getting very, very uneasy in the Republican Party. And then I'll never forget, in 1985, Jerry Falwell went and made a trip to South Africa. And he came back and made a speech in which he called Desmond Tutu a phony. And I said, that's it, I've had it with these people. And I went in the next day and changed my registration.
Who was the first person that you went to and said, I'm switching parties?
Oh, good question. Probably my wife.
Yeah, that would make sense. Now, I want to talk about another president, and that's Barack Obama. You were in Congress when President Obama was our president.
All 8 of his
Did you
years.
spend any time in the Oval Office?
You know, it's funny you mention that. I was never in the Oval Office with Obama. I was in a number of other rooms in the White House. I was in the Roosevelt room and the cabinet room and one of the SCIFs, the top secret rooms, but never in the Oval with him. I was right off the Oval once because Rahm Emanuel, who had been in the House of Representatives, was his chief of staff at the time. And so I was in Rahm's office right off the Oval, but I didn't get in the Oval until Joe Biden.
I'll be.
Yeah.
And how many times?
Just once.
Just once.
Just once.
Did you have anything to do with Jerry Abramson becoming a part of the administration?
Jerry was so well known and was chairman of the National Mayors, whatever their organization's called. Barack Obama was very familiar with Jerry. He didn't need an introduction.
Okay.
But I have my best story about Jerry Abramson.
Please.
So Jerry was convinced President Obama to make a trip to Louisville. And there was no really good reason, but Jerry wanted to say he had done it once, and the president agreed. So the president flew down on AirForce One. I was invited to go on AirForce One. And
How is that ride, by the way?
it's top. It's a great experience. So yeah, I was on AirForce One twice, but it happened to be the day that they actually agreed on the Iran nuclear deal. And everything got set back a few hours because the president had to have an announcement in the Rose Garden, and I was sitting in the upstairs from the Oval waiting to catch the flight back. Anyway, so I'm the only one on the plane in the VIP section, which is basically set up for about 8 people. I had 4 people waiting on me, but I was the only one there. So I get off the plane. Well, I get to we land in Louisville, and nobody's told me what I'm supposed to do. I'm flying blind here. So the president comes out of his office, and we stood and talked for a few minutes. He was telling me about some of the calls he had made to talk about the nuclear deal. And he says, okay, let's go. So we walked down the steps, which he didn't do with most people. I later found out. But for me, this is the $1 million shot, right? You're walking down the steps from AirForce One, the president in your hometown.
Sure.
So we get to the bottom of the steps, and there are a few military people from the Kentucky Air National Guard there greeting him. And I still don't know what I'm supposed to do. So Jerry, who had to fly in the staff cabin, I see him out of the corner of my eye, and he's walking toward the presidential limousine. So, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So the president starts walking toward the limousine. I'm just staying in place. He turns around and he says, John, come on. So I go in and get in the limousine.
That was good of him.
Yeah, so I get in the limousine. So the president and Jerry are sitting in the back seat looking forward. I'm sitting across from them looking out the back. So I said, would it be crazy of me to take a picture of you two sitting there? And the president says, no, it would be stupid. Jerry needs to be taking the picture. You need to be sitting here with me. So he made Jerry switch with me.
That's right.
And I have this wonderful picture of the two of us with the presidential seal behind us sitting in that back seat.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right, question a little more serious. I have heard that when freshman congressmen come into the legislature, the first thing that happens is staff comes to you and they tell you how much money you need to raise in order to be on committees that are desirable. How true is that, and how much pressure were you under in your first term to raise money? And did you have to raise a lot of money to get there?
There's a kernel of truth to that, but my first term, because I had beaten a five-term incumbent, Republican incumbent, I was part of what was called the Frontline program, and these are Democratic members who won election but are in highly competitive districts. If you're a Frontline member, you have no dues obligation. So if anything you want to do, anything you can do to raise money for the party, you would do. And if you wanted to get on a top committee, we knew it helped, but there was never any pressure put on me. And I don't really recall that. I mean, everybody knew the game, that if you wanted to get on Ways and Means or the Appropriations Committee, you weren't going to get on your first term no matter what, and you had to help the party.
That's the game.
And that's the dues structure. And you also knew that if you got on those committees, your dues would be higher. Your annual dues, well, it's not annual, your biennial dues, would be higher than normal. So when I got on Ways and Means in my second term, my dues were $250,000. So I had to raise $250,000.
Now, when you say dues, you mean you have to raise $250,000 for the Democrats that are running for office.
That's right. For the
And the same thing goes for the Republicans.
That's right.
It's equal. I mean,
They have their own, yeah, they have a similar program, sure. I don't know what their amounts are, I don't know if they're equal, but I assume they're pretty close. And so if you were on so I was on Ways and Means in my second term, that's called an exclusive committee. There are four of those. Now, Ways and Means, Energy and Commerce, the Appropriations Committee, and Financial Services. And those are committees where, at least ostensibly, you are not supposed to serve on any other committee. That's why they're called exclusives. But there are a lot of waivers given and so forth. So I was on Ways and Means, and then because of my spot on Ways and Means, I got Ways and Means has 3 automatic seats on the Budget Committee by rule. So I got one of the 3 seats on the Budget Committee. So I was on those 2 committees in my second term. But if you're on like the Education Committee, which I was on my first year, the dues would be like $75,000.
Gee whiz. All right. I have to ask you this as we close up. I've known you for over 20 years. Is the fact that you left Congress, did it become distasteful, the money raising process, the pressure to raise money, the notion that to be a player you had to be a money raiser? Did that start to eat at you, and is that why you got out of
It
Congress?
was definitely not the reason. That was not a factor at all.
What was the factor?
The factor was I was back in, I turned 75 in 2022.
You're a young 75, my friend.
Thank you. It's the bourbon mostly.
Yes.
I turned 75. I said, if I have 5 minutes left on earth or 25 years, I'm going to decide how to spend it. And I'm going to control my own life. And when you're in Congress, you don't. You don't really control any of it. And I have 2 young grandsons, and it was like, I never want to miss a significant moment in their lives. So it was entirely those 2 considerations. Plus, in my last term, I was chairman of the Budget Committee. We passed the American Rescue Plan and the Inflation Reduction Act, both of those bills, my name is on it as the author.
Nice.
So if you look up American Rescue Plan, it'll say, Mr. Yarmuth introduced it. I didn't write a word of either one of them.
Nice.
But because they came through the Budget Committee, because of the process we used,
It was yours.
It was mine. And one of my jobs was to shepherd it through the House, because we could only lose, we're like the Republicans are now, we could only lose 3 votes. 3 Democratic votes, because we knew we weren't going to get any Republican votes. So my job was to meet with Democrats, and I spent most of 2021 doing that, and we finally passed it. So I said, you know, I just helped pass a bill. My name's on it. The second most expensive bill in the history of the country, $1.9 trillion. $1.9 trillion, gave incredible help. You know, it was $1,400 to every adult. It was children got $250 or $300 a month, regardless of need, because we were trying to pull out of the pandemic. Wow. And so it helped millions and millions of people. The city got $400 million roughly. JCPS got $380 million. And I said, you know, this is a drop the mic moment for me. I will never be able to do as much for as many people or help my district the way those bills just did. So all of those were the factors that said it's time to hang them up.
Now, Congressman, a couple of things that need to be said about this outstanding Louisvillian. He donated all of his salary to different charities here in Louisville, which was absolutely, it's $168,000 a year, by the way.
174.
Excuse me, I stand corrected. So,
and there hasn't been a raise in congressional salaries since 2009.
Maybe you need to get to work on that.
We tried. We tried.
Well, this is Larry Bisig. I'm live on 4th Street with Congressman John Yarmuth. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again. Congressman, thank you.
My pleasure, Larry. Good to be with you.